The sleek black car pulled up to the curb outside the Westmont Hotel, its polished exterior gleaming under the afternoon sun. As the driver opened the rear door, Anthony Reed stepped out, straightening his custom navy suit. He was tired but alert, his mind already mapping out the presentation he needed to finish before tomorrow's meeting. Anthony had built Skyline Innovations from nothing into a tech powerhouse over 15 years. Just last week, his company had secured $500 million in new funding, a victory that still hadn't fully sunk in. But right now, all he wanted was a quiet business suite where he could work, order room service, and prepare for tomorrow. The hotel's glass doors opened with a soft whoosh. The Westmont was known for its luxury and exclusive business accommodations. Its marble floors and chandelier-lit lobby spoke of old money and privilege. Anthony had stayed in hundreds of hotels around the world, but he'd chosen the Westmont specifically for their business suites, equipped with everything executives needed. He approached the front desk, where a thin man with graying temples looked up without quite meeting Anthony's eyes. "Good afternoon," Anthony said, placing his leather briefcase beside him. "I have a reservation for a business suite for 2 nights. The clerk's fingers tapped at the keyboard. "Your name, sir?" "Anthony Reed, R-E-I-D. The clerk's eyes darted across the screen. "I don't seem to find your reservation, Mr. Reed." Anthony reached for his phone. "That's strange. I have the confirmation email right here." He turned the screen toward the clerk, showing the reservation details he'd received just that morning. "I see," the clerk said after barely glancing at it. "Unfortunately, it appears there's been a system error. All our business suites are currently occupied." Anthony checked his watch. He'd been traveling since 5 a.m., and this delay was the last thing he needed. "That's impossible," he said, keeping his voice measured. "I confirmed availability this morning and received confirmation. Is there any way to check again?" The clerk shook his head. "I'm sorry, sir. Perhaps you'd prefer one of our standard rooms." As they spoke, a tall man in a gray suit approached the desk beside them. The other desk clerk greeted him warmly. "Welcome back to the Westmont. Mr. Thompson, your business suite is ready for you." Anthony's attention shifted to this exchange, watching as the white businessman was handed a key card with a smile. No reservation issues there. This wasn't new to Anthony. Throughout his career, he'd faced these moments, subtle barriers, different treatment, assumptions made before he even spoke. Usually he chose his battles carefully, but today, after landing the biggest deal of his career, he didn't feel like accepting the situation. "Excuse me," he said, his tone still professional but firmer now. "I couldn't help overhearing. It seems business suites are available after all." The clerk flushed slightly. "That was a prearranged reservation, sir." "So was mine," Anthony replied, showing his phone again. "I'd like to speak with the manager, please." The clerk's lips thinned, but he picked up the phone, speaking in hushed tones. Anthony stood patiently, observing the lobby around him. A group of executives chatted near the bar. Hotel staff hurried across the floor. Everything normal except for this one small friction that felt all too familiar. 5 minutes later, a woman in her 50s approached. Her navy suit matched the hotel's color scheme perfectly, and her pearl necklace bounced slightly as she walked with quick, purposeful steps. "Mr. Reed, I'm Elaine Hartwell, General Manager. How can I help you today?" Anthony explained the situation calmly, showing his confirmation email again. The manager listened with a practiced neutral expression. "I understand your frustration," she said when he finished, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But our system shows all business suites are occupied. Perhaps there was a glitch when you made your reservation. We can offer you a deluxe room with a small discount for the inconvenience." Anthony noticed she hadn't bothered to check the computer herself. Behind them, another guest was being escorted to the elevator, the staff member mentioning your business suite clearly enough for Anthony to hear. "Ms. Hartwell," he said quietly, "I've just witnessed 2 other guests receive business suites while I'm being told they're unavailable. I've been a platinum member of your hotel rewards program for 5 years. I've stayed at Westmont properties in Chicago, London, and Singapore. I specifically chose this hotel for its business facilities, which I need for an important presentation tomorrow." The manager's smile remained fixed. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at another establishment? I'd be happy to suggest some alternatives nearby." There it was, not an outright rejection but a gentle push toward the door. Anthony had experienced this before. the subtle implication that he didn't quite belong in spaces like this. Despite his accomplishments, despite his custom suit and executive position, despite the millions he'd earned through years of strategic brilliance and tireless work, Anthony didn't raise his voice. He didn't create a scene. 15 years of navigating corporate America had taught him that showing anger would only reinforce stereotypes. Instead, he smiled slightly and took out his phone. "That won't be necessary. Ms. Hartwell, excuse me for a moment." He stepped away from the desk and dialed a number, walking toward the quiet corner of the lobby. "Harrison, it's Anthony. Remember that hospitality investment we discussed last quarter? I think I've found an interesting opportunity. The Westmont hotel chain." On the other end, Harrison Chen, his VP of acquisitions, was surprised. "The Westmont? That wasn't on our radar. What changed your mind?" "Let's call it a moment of clarity," Anthony replied, watching the manager and clerk whispering behind the desk. "They're providing a case study in poor customer service and possibly discriminatory practices. More importantly, I just remembered seeing them on that list of financially troubled properties we reviewed." "Hold on, let me pull it up," Harrison said. Anthony could hear typing in the background. "Yes, here it is. The Westmont Group. Struggling with debt, outdated management structure, trying to quietly find buyers without alarming their customer base. Current valuation around $18.7 million, but that's probably optimistic." Anthony watched as another black guest approached the desk and was told something that made him leave looking frustrated. "Make an offer of $22 million, contingent on a 30-day closing period and full review of their books, and get our legal team to start a quiet review of their customer service complaints. I suspect we'll find a pattern." "That's above market value," Harrison pointed out. "Speed and certainty have value," Anthony replied. "And if my suspicions are correct, this place needs new management more than they realize." "This isn't just business, Harrison. It's a chance to change something. I'll start the paperwork right away. Do you want me to set up a formal meeting with their executives?" "No need," Anthony said. "I'm standing in their lobby right now. I'll handle the initial approach personally." The call had taken exactly 10 minutes. During that time, Anthony had watched the normal flow of the hotel, noting which guests received immediate attention and which had to wait. The patterns were subtle but unmistakable to someone who had spent a lifetime observing such distinctions. He walked back to the front desk, where Ms. Hartwell was still standing, now looking slightly uncomfortable. "Mr. Reed, we've found a standard room for you, and we'd be happy to offer it complimentary for tonight's inconvenience." Anthony smiled politely and placed his business card on the counter. It was simple, elegant, just his name and founder and CEO. "Skyline Innovations with contact information." "That's very kind but unnecessary. Ms. Hartwell, my company is prepared to offer $22 million to purchase the Westmont hotel chain, with the contingency that the sale closes within 30 days. I understand your parent company has been quietly seeking buyers for some time." The color drained from her face. Behind her, the clerk had frozen in place, staring at Anthony with new eyes. I don't have the authority to discuss such matters," she stammered, picking up his card and reading it. "Of course not," Anthony said kindly, "but I believe you can connect me with someone who does. In the meantime, I think I'll have a drink at your bar. It seems I'll be conducting a property inspection rather than needing that business suite after all." As Anthony walked away, he heard the frantic whispers behind him, the hurried phone call, the sudden change in atmosphere. His phone buzzed with a text from Harrison. "Offer paperwork being drafted now. Their parent company will receive it within the hour." Anthony settled at the bar, ordered a sparkling water, and allowed himself a small smile. This wasn't how he'd planned to spend his afternoon. But sometimes life presented unexpected opportunities. He'd faced closed doors throughout his career. This time, he wasn't just going to knock politely. He was going to buy the building. Tomorrow's presentation would need to wait. He had a hotel chain to acquire. Anthony sat at the hotel bar, sipping his sparkling water while keeping one eye on his phone. The sleek marble countertop reflected the soft overhead lights, and around him, business travelers unwound after long days of meetings. None of them knew that the quiet man in the navy suit was about to buy the entire building they were sitting in. His phone buzzed with incoming messages from Harrison and the rest of his executive team. The wheels were already in motion. Within 20 minutes of his call, his company's legal department had sent the official offer to the Westmont's parent company, Sterling Hospitality Group. The hotel staff had noticed something was happening. The front desk clerk who had denied him a room kept glancing nervously in his direction. Two managers huddled in a corner, speaking in hushed tones while occasionally looking his way. Anthony simply smiled politely whenever he caught their eye. He opened his laptop and began researching more about Sterling Hospitality. Their financial troubles were worse than he'd initially thought. 6 quarters of declining revenue, an executive team plagued by scandals, and a corporate culture that seemed resistant to necessary changes. What had begun as a response to discrimination was quickly revealing itself as a smart business opportunity. "Mr. Reed?" Anthony looked up to see a new face approaching his table. A tall man with a receding hairline and an expensive suit extended his hand. "I'm Victor Powell, Regional Director for Sterling Hospitality. I understand you've expressed interest in our properties." Anthony stood and shook the man's hand firmly. "That's correct. Please have a seat." Powell settled into the chair across from Anthony, his expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "This is quite unusual, Mr. Reed. Typically, acquisitions don't begin in hotel lobbies. Typically, hotels don't deny rooms to paying customers based on how they look," Anthony replied evenly. "But I'm a businessman first. This isn't about revenge, it's about recognizing an opportunity." Powell's face flushed slightly. "I assure you, if there was any misunderstanding with your reservation, it wasn't a misunderstanding," Anthony cut in gently. "But that's not what I want to discuss right now. I want to talk about why Sterling Hospitality has been struggling to maintain market share, why your occupancy rates have fallen 12% in the last year alone, and why your customer satisfaction scores have dropped to their lowest point in a decade." Powell's eyes widened slightly. "You've done your homework." "Always," Anthony nodded. "The offer my team sent is 15% above your current market valuation. It's a generous price for a struggling chain. But it's contingent on a quick closing period because I believe every day under current management is costing this business value." A woman appeared at Powell's shoulder, Elaine Hartwell, the general manager who had suggested Anthony might be more comfortable elsewhere. Her face was professionally composed, but her eyes betrayed her anxiety. "Mr. Powell, the CEO of Sterling is on the line for you," she said quietly. Powell nodded and stood. "If you'll excuse me, Mr. Reed, I need to take this call." "Of course," Anthony replied. "I'll be here." As Powell hurried away, Hartwell lingered awkwardly. "Mr. Reed, about earlier." "Ms. Hartwell," Anthony interrupted softly. "I think we both know what happened earlier. The question is, what happens next?" She swallowed hard. "I've worked for the Westmont for 17 years. And how many qualified guests have been turned away in those 17 years because they didn't fit someone's idea of who belongs here?" he asked, not unkindly. Before she could answer, his phone rang. It was Harrison. "Excuse me," Anthony said to Hartwell, who nodded and quickly retreated. "Anthony, their CEO, just called our office directly," Harrison said when Anthony answered. "They're taking the offer seriously." "Very seriously." "I thought they might," Anthony replied, watching Powell across the lobby, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing animatedly. "Their regional director is here now talking to their CEO." "This is moving faster than we expected," Harrison continued. "Do you want me to fly out there tonight?" Anthony considered this. "No, not yet. Let's see how this initial conversation goes, but have the team prepare a detailed analysis of all Westmont properties, staffing structures, and customer complaint histories. I want to know exactly what we're buying." "Already on it," Harrison assured him. "The team is excited, by the way. When I told them why you decided to make this move, Rosa from marketing actually stood up and cheered." Anthony smiled at that. Rosa had experienced her own share of subtle discrimination throughout her career. "Tell everyone I appreciate their quick work. I'll call you after my meeting with Powell." He ended the call just as Powell was returning to the table, his expression now one of carefully managed respect. "Mr. Reed, our CEO would like to speak with you directly. We have a private conference room if you'd prefer more privacy." Anthony gathered his laptop and stood. "Lead the way." As they walked through the lobby, Anthony noticed how the staff watched him, their expressions a mixture of confusion, curiosity, and in some cases, concern. Word was spreading about what was happening, though the details were still unclear to most. The conference room was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A large screen on one wall was already set up for the video call. Powell pressed a few buttons, and moments later, The face of William Braxton, CEO of Sterling Hospitality Group, appeared on screen. "Mr. Reed." Braxton nodded formally. "This is certainly an unexpected development." "Life is full of unexpected developments, Mr. Braxton," Anthony replied. "Like being told there are no available rooms when there clearly are." Braxton frowned slightly. "If there was any misunderstanding—" "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Anthony said for the second time that evening. "But let's focus on business. Your company has been quietly shopping the Westmont chain for months without success. I'm offering a premium over market value with a quick closing timeline. The question is, are you ready to sell?" Braxton studied Anthony for a moment before speaking. "Your offer is on it compelling, but I'm curious why you'd pay above market value for a chain you believe is underperforming." "Because I see its potential," Anthony answered truthfully. "The Westmont has good bones, prime locations, and a recognized brand. What it lacks is forward-thinking leadership and a truly inclusive culture. I believe I can fix those problems." "And this has nothing to do with whatever happened at check-in today?" Braxton asked skeptically. Anthony leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Braxton, I've built a billion-dollar company by recognizing opportunities others miss. What happened today simply brought the Westmont to my attention. Once I looked closer, I saw a business investment worth making. The fact that it might also allow me to address some troubling practices is what I call a win-win." Powell shifted uncomfortably in his seat while Braxton considered Anthony's words. "We'll need our board to review the offer formally," Braxton finally said. "But speaking candidly, I believe they'll be receptive. Would you be open to meeting in person tomorrow to discuss details?" "My schedule is tight, but I can make time," Anthony replied. "I'll have my CFO and legal counsel fly in tonight." "Good," Braxton nodded. "And Mr. Reed, for what it's worth, I apologize for your experience today. It's not the standard we aim for." "Actions speak louder than words, Mr. Braxton," Anthony said quietly. "I'll look forward to our meeting tomorrow." When the call ended, Powell escorted Anthony back to the lobby. The atmosphere had changed noticeably. Staff who had been dismissive earlier now watched him with newfound attentiveness. The front desk clerk who had denied him a room couldn't meet his eyes. "Mr. Reed," Powell said as they reached the lobby, "we've prepared our finest suite for you, complimentary of course. I hope you'll accept." Anthony considered the offer for a moment. "Thank you, but I've made other arrangements." He had, in fact, already booked a room at a competing hotel down the street. "I'll see you at the meeting tomorrow, Mr. Powell." As Anthony walked toward the exit, he passed Elaine Hartwell, who stood rigidly by the front desk. "Ms. Hartwell," he said, pausing briefly, "I meant what I said earlier. This isn't about revenge. It's about creating change. I hope you'll be part of that change." She looked at him with uncertainty in her eyes. "You're not planning to fire everyone?" "I don't believe in punishing people who can learn and grow," Anthony replied. "But I do believe in accountability and second chances, when they're earned." Outside, his driver was waiting with the car door open. As Anthony settled into the back seat, he checked his messages. Harrison and the team would arrive by midnight. The lawyers had already drafted preliminary paperwork. Things were moving quickly. Anthony looked back at the gleaming facade of the Westmont Hotel. Just hours ago, he'd been denied entry because of how he looked. Now he was on the verge of owning the entire chain. Life had a way of creating unexpected opportunities, especially for those prepared to seize them. "Where to, sir?" his driver asked. "The Grandview Hotel," Anthony replied. "And then I'll need you to pick up my team at the airport later tonight." As the car pulled away, Anthony made one more call to his mother. "Hey, Mom," he said when she answered. "Anthony, how's your trip going?" Her warm voice immediately centered him, as it always had. "It's interesting," he replied, smiling. "Remember how you always told me that closed doors aren't always locked? There's sometimes opportunities in disguise." "Of course I remember. Why, what happened?" Anthony watched the Westmont disappear from view as the car turned a corner. "I think I'm about to buy a hotel chain." There was a pause before his mother laughed. "Only you, Anthony. Only you would turn being denied a room into buying the whole building." "Actually," he corrected gently, "it's 37 buildings, and it's just good business." His mother's laugh filled the car, and Anthony felt the tension of the day finally beginning to ease. Tomorrow would bring negotiations, paperwork, and the first steps toward transforming the Westmont into something better than it had been. But tonight he would rest, knowing that sometimes the best response to discrimination wasn't anger, but excellence. Morning light streamed through the windows of the Grandview Hotel's executive suite as Anthony adjusted his tie. He had slept surprisingly well, considering the unexpected turn his business trip had taken. What had begun as a simple need for a quiet place to work had evolved into potentially the largest acquisition his company had made to date. A knock at the door announced the arrival of his team. Harrison entered first, followed by Diane, his chief financial officer, and Thomas, head of the legal department. All three looked remarkably put together despite having flown in late the previous night. "Good morning," Anthony greeted them. "I appreciate you all coming on such short notice." "Are you kidding?" Diane replied, setting her laptop on the conference table. "When Harrison told us what happened, I couldn't wait to get here. This might be the most satisfying acquisition we've ever made." Thomas nodded in agreement as he spread out several folders. "I've reviewed Sterling Hospitality's public filings. They're in worse shape than we initially thought. 3 of their board members are facing shareholder lawsuits. Their debt-to-equity ratio is concerning, and they've been quietly selling off assets to stay afloat. Which means they need this deal more than we do," Harrison added. Anthony took a seat at the table. "That may be true, but I don't want to exploit their desperation. This isn't about crushing them, it's about creating something better. So let's be firm but fair in the negotiations." His team exchanged knowing glances. This was typical Anthony, tough but ethical even when he had the upper hand. "I've prepared an overview of potential restructuring options," Diane said, sliding a document across the table. "Based on their current operations, we could implement immediate changes that would improve their bottom line within 2 quarters. Anthony scanned the document, nodding. "Good work. And what about the staff?" "That's where it gets interesting," Harrison replied, pulling up data on his tablet. "We've analyzed employee reviews and customer complaints across all Westmont properties. There's a clear pattern of discrimination complaints, but they're concentrated in management, not among the regular staff. Housekeeping, maintenance, kitchen. Those departments actually have excellent feedback. So the problem is leadership, not the workers," Anthony concluded. "That's what I suspected." Thomas cleared his throat. "Speaking of leadership, I took the liberty of researching Ms. Hartwell, the general manager who denied you a room. Her personnel file shows she's been passed over for promotion 3 times, despite excellent performance metrics. Each time the position went to less qualified male candidates." Anthony leaned back, processing this information. "So she's experienced discrimination herself, yet perpetuates it against others. That's unfortunately common. People often adopt the culture they're surrounded by," Diane observed, "especially when fighting it might cost them their jobs. Which is why culture change has to come from the top," Anthony said decisively. "Let's head to the meeting. I want to make sure we're clear on our approach. We're buying this chain not just as a business opportunity, but as a chance to transform its culture." The Westmont's main conference room looked different in daylight. Large windows showcased the city skyline, and the morning sun highlighted the rich wood table where Sterling Hospitality's executives were already gathered. William Braxton sat at the head, flanked by his CFO and legal counsel. Victor Powell sat nearby, along with 2 board members who had flown in overnight. As Anthony and his team entered, there was a palpable shift in the room's energy. These were people who had expected to negotiate from a position of strength all their professional lives. Now they found themselves across from someone they had underestimated. "Mr. Reed," Braxton stood to greet him, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." Anthony shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for accommodating our tight schedule." Once everyone was seated, Braxton's CFO distributed packets containing Sterling's counterproposal. "We've reviewed your offer and prepared a response that we believe addresses both parties' interests." Anthony nodded to Diane, who began reviewing the document with practiced efficiency. The room fell silent except for the occasional turning of pages. Anthony observed the faces around the table, noting the tension in their expressions. These were people unaccustomed to being on the defensive. After a few minutes, Diane looked up. "The purchase price is acceptable," she said directly to Anthony. "But they've extended the closing timeline to 90 days and added several contingencies that would allow them to back out." Thomas nodded in agreement with her assessment. "They're keeping their options open, hoping a better offer comes along." Anthony turned to Braxton. You're playing for time. Braxton didn't deny it. We have a responsibility to our shareholders to explore all options. I understand, Anthony replied calmly. But my offer is contingent on a 30-day closing period for a reason. Every day that passes under current management costs this company value. Not just financial value, but reputational value. He opened his laptop and turned it so everyone could see the screen. This is a compilation of discrimination complaints filed against Westmont Properties in the last 3 years. 67 formal complaints with an estimated hundreds more that went unreported. This isn't just morally troubling. It's a legal and financial liability. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of them, an older man with silver hair, spoke up. We've addressed those complaints through our standard procedures. Standard procedures that resulted in 0 substantive changes, Anthony countered. Which is why I'm not just buying your hotels. I'm buying the opportunity to fix a broken culture. He closed his laptop and leaned forward. My offer remains $22 million 30-day closing period, no contingencies except standard due diligence. But I'm adding something new. Retention bonuses for non-management staff, severance packages for executives who choose not to stay, and a complete overhaul of your diversity and inclusion policies. The room fell silent as the Sterling team processed his words. Finally, Braxton spoke. That's quite comprehensive. It needs to be, Anthony replied simply. Powell, who had been quiet until now, cleared his throat. And what about current management? People like myself and Ms. Hartwell? Everyone will have an opportunity to be part of the new Westmont, Anthony said. But it will require embracing change, including additional training and a commitment to creating a truly inclusive environment. He turned back to Braxton. You have until the end of business today to accept or reject our offer. If you reject it, I'll withdraw completely. If you try to extend negotiations beyond today, I'll withdraw and make my findings about the discrimination patterns public. The ultimatum hung in the air. Braxton's legal counsel whispered something in his ear, but he waved her off. You're not leaving us much choice, Mr. Reed. On the contrary, Anthony replied. I'm offering you the choice to be part of something better. Now, if you'll excuse us, my team and I will give you some time to discuss. As Anthony and his team stood to leave, one of the board members spoke up. Why are you doing this, really? Is it just because of what happened yesterday? Anthony paused at the door. Yesterday was a symptom, not the cause. I'm doing this because spaces like the Westmont should be welcoming to everyone who can afford them, not just those who look a certain way. And because sometimes meaningful change requires bold action. They waited in a smaller conference room down the hall. Through the glass walls, Anthony could see hotel staff going about their duties, unaware that the ownership of their workplace hung in the balance. Do you think they'll accept? Harrison asked. They don't have better options, Diane replied. Their financials are too weak to hold out for another buyer. Anthony nodded in agreement but added, It's not just about the money for them. It's about accepting that their way of doing business is ending. That's harder for some people than losing money. 2 hours later, Powell appeared at their door. Mr. Braxton would like to speak with you. They returned to the main conference room where Braxton stood alone, the rest of his team conspicuously absent. We accept your offer, he said without preamble. The board has authorized me to move forward with the 30-day closing period and all your terms. Anthony nodded. A wise decision. But I want to be clear about something, Braxton continued. What happened to you at check-in yesterday was unfortunate, but it was an isolated incident not reflective of our company values. Anthony held Braxton's gaze steadily. Mr. Braxton, when a CEO says one thing but allows another to happen repeatedly throughout his organization, the actions speak louder than the words. The values of a company aren't what's written in the mission statement, they're what's permitted to happen every day. Braxton had no response to that. Instead, he extended his hand. The paperwork will be ready this afternoon. As they shook hands, Anthony felt the weight of what he had accomplished. In less than 24 hours, he had gone from being denied a hotel room to purchasing the entire chain. But the real work, transforming the Westmont's culture, was just beginning. Later that evening, as Anthony and his team celebrated in his suite at the Grandview, Harrison raised his glass in a toast. To turning discrimination into opportunity. Anthony smiled but shook his head slightly. No, to creating spaces where discrimination doesn't happen in the first place. As they clinked glasses, Anthony gazed out at the Westmont building visible through the window. Tomorrow he would begin the process of transforming it into something better than it had been. A place where everyone would be welcomed, regardless of how they looked or where they came from. Sometimes, the most powerful response to being told no was to become the person who could say yes to others. 30 days passed in a whirlwind of paperwork, meetings, and planning sessions. The acquisition of the Westmont hotel chain was finalized on a rainy Tuesday morning with little fanfare, just signatures on documents and wire transfers between accounts. But for Anthony, this moment represented far more than a business transaction. He stood in the lobby of the flagship Westmont, the very same lobby where he'd been told no rooms were available just a month earlier. The marble floors and crystal chandeliers remained the same, but there was a palpable difference in the atmosphere. Staff members moved with a mixture of nervousness and curiosity, unsure what this change in ownership would mean for them. "Mr. Reed," a familiar voice called. Elaine Hartwell approached, her posture stiff but her expression open. "Everything is prepared for your address to the staff." Anthony nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Hartwell, and thank you for staying on during this transition. I know it couldn't have been easy." Something flickered across her face, surprise perhaps at his graciousness. I appreciate the opportunity to prove myself. Not everyone would have given me that chance." "Second chances are important," Anthony replied, "as long as people are willing to learn and grow." The hotel's largest event space had been transformed for this occasion. Nearly 300 employees from the flagship location had gathered, from housekeepers to kitchen staff, maintenance workers to front desk personnel. They sat in rows, their expressions ranging from worried to hopeful. Harrison and Diane stood off to the side with the transition team they'd assembled. The next few months would be crucial for establishing the new direction of the Westmont chain. As Anthony took the stage, a hush fell over the room. These people had heard rumors about why their company had been sold and who their new boss was. Most knew about the incident that had triggered it all, though versions of the story varied widely. "Good morning," Anthony began, his voice warm and clear. "My name is Anthony Reed, and as of today I'm the new owner of the Westmont Hotel Group. I imagine many of you have questions about what this means for you and for the future of this company." He paused, looking around the room and making eye contact with various staff members. "Let me start by telling you why I'm here. A month ago I walked into this hotel as a guest and was denied a room because of how I look. It wasn't stated explicitly, of course, these things rarely are. But as I stood at the front desk watching other guests receive the very rooms I was told weren't available, the message was clear. Some people are more welcome here than others." A murmur ran through the audience. Many looked down, uncomfortable with this direct acknowledgement of what had long been an unspoken reality. I could have walked away angry. I could have filed a complaint that would likely have been ignored. Instead, I made a phone call and began the process of buying this entire hotel chain. He smiled slightly at the surprised faces looking back at him. "Now, I could stand here and tell you that I did this because I saw a good business opportunity, which is partly true. The Westmont has prime locations, a recognized brand, and most importantly, dedicated staff with untapped potential. But the complete truth is that I bought this company because I believe spaces like this should be welcoming to everyone who can afford them, regardless of what they look like or where they come from." Anthony stepped away from the podium and moved to the front of the stage, creating a more intimate connection with his audience. "I'm not here to fire all of you and start over. That's not my style, and it wouldn't solve the real problem. The issue at the Westmont hasn't been with the majority of you who clean the rooms, prepare the food, maintain the buildings, and directly serve our guests. The problem has been with a culture that starts at the top and filters down, a culture that allowed certain biases to influence how people are treated." He gestured to Harrison, who stepped forward with a stack of folders. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for the Westmont. Over the next 6 months, we'll be implementing changes designed to transform not just how this business operates, but how it feels for both employees and guests." Anthony outlined the changes: a comprehensive diversity and inclusion training program that would be mandatory for all staff, the creation of a new customer service approach focused on making every guest feel valued, improved benefits for employees including higher wages and better healthcare options, and a clear path to advancement based on performance rather than connections. For too long, the hospitality industry has maintained invisible barriers, subtle ways of making certain people feel less welcome. At the new Westmont, we're tearing those barriers down. Our success will be measured not just by our profitability, but by creating spaces where everyone belongs. As he spoke, Anthony could see the shift in the room, doubt giving way to cautious optimism, skepticism softening into interest. These were people who had worked under management that often didn't value their contributions. The idea that their new boss saw them as essential to the company's success was both novel and energizing. Now, I won't pretend this transition will be easy, Anthony continued. Change rarely is. Some of you may decide this new direction isn't for you, and that's okay. But for those who stay, I promise you this: your work will be valued, your voice will be heard, and your growth will be supported. After his speech, Anthony made a point of meeting as many staff members as possible, shaking hands and listening to their stories. Many had experienced their own versions of discrimination, both as employees and in their personal lives. Others admitted they had witnessed incidents but felt powerless to speak up. One housekeeper, an older woman who had worked at the Westmont for 22 years, gripped his hand firmly and said, "My son is studying business at community college. I'm going to tell him about you tonight." In the weeks that followed, the transformation began in earnest. The executive team was restructured, with some departures and many new additions that brought fresh perspectives. Anthony personally reviewed the discrimination complaints that had been filed over the years, reaching out to those customers with personal apologies and invitations to return as his guests. Elaine Hartwell, surprisingly, became one of the strongest advocates for the new approach. During her first session of the diversity training program, she broke down in tears while sharing how she had compromised her own values to fit into the corporate culture, becoming part of a system she had once been hurt by herself. "I became what I needed to be to survive here," she admitted to the group, "and in the process I lost sight of who I wanted to be." Anthony assigned her to lead a new initiative focused on guest experience, challenging her to create protocols that would ensure every person who walked through the Westmont's doors felt equally welcomed. She threw herself into the work with the passion of someone finally aligned with her true values. The physical spaces of the hotels began to change as well. Art from diverse artists adorned the walls. The marketing materials were redesigned to subtly reflect a more inclusive vision of luxury. Even the hotel restaurants were revamped, their menus expanded to include dishes from a wider range of cultural traditions, prepared with authentic respect for their origins. 3 months into the transition, Anthony received a report from Harrison showing the first indicators of their impact. Customer satisfaction scores were trending upward, particularly in categories related to feeling welcomed and staff attentiveness. Employee retention had improved despite the significant changes, and applications for open positions had increased dramatically as word spread about the new Westmont culture. "It's working," Harrison said, clearly pleased, "and faster than we projected." "It's a good start," Anthony agreed cautiously. "But cultural change isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. We need to make sure these improvements last beyond the initial excitement." That evening, Anthony checked into a business suite at the flagship Westmont for the first time. The front desk clerk who greeted him was new, hired during the recent expansion. She had no idea that the polite man requesting a room was the owner of the entire chain. "Of course, Mr. Reed," she said brightly after checking her computer. "We have several business suites available. Would you prefer a city view or the quieter garden view?" "The city view, please," Anthony replied, watching her face carefully for any change in expression when she processed his credit card and ID. There was none, just the same professional courtesy she would show any guest. As the elevator carried him to his floor, Anthony felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. The real measure of their success wasn't how people treated him when they knew he was the owner, but how they treated every guest who walked through the door, regardless of who they appeared to be. The transformation of the Westmont was far from complete, but they were on the right path. What had begun as a moment of discrimination had evolved into an opportunity to create something better, not just for himself, but for everyone who would walk through these doors in the years to come. 3 years had passed since Anthony Reed walked into the Westmont Hotel and was told no rooms were available. 3 years since a moment of discrimination sparked a transformation that rippled far beyond one hotel chain. Anthony stood at the window of his office, looking out at the city skyline. Behind him, a team of executives waited for him to begin their quarterly review meeting. The conference table was set with pitchers of water, notepads, and tablets displaying the latest performance metrics for what was now called Reed Hospitality Group. "Let's get started," Anthony said, turning to face his team. He took his seat at the head of the table, immediately noticing the energy in the room. These quarterly reviews had once been tense affairs, with everyone nervous about reporting their numbers. Now they had the atmosphere of a family gathering, professional but warm, focused but supportive. Harrison, still Anthony's trusted VP of Acquisitions and now Chief Operating Officer, began the presentation. 3 years in, and the results speak for themselves. Revenue is up 42% across all properties. Customer satisfaction scores are at an all-time high. Employee retention has increased from 68% to 91%. He clicked to the next slide, which showed a map dotted with locations. We've expanded from the original 37 Westmont properties to 52 hotels in 6 countries. The Reed Hospitality brand is now recognized internationally as a leader in both luxury service and inclusive business practices. Diane, who had been promoted to Chief Strategy Officer, took over. Beyond the financial metrics, we're seeing something remarkable in our customer demographics. We've expanded our guest base significantly without losing our core clients. People who never would have considered staying at a Westmont are now loyal Reed Hospitality customers. Anthony nodded, remembering the research they'd done in those early months. Many people of color and those from other marginalized groups had avoided the Westmont, having either experienced discrimination themselves or heard about it from others. That invisible barrier had cost the previous owners millions in unrealized revenue. "And the training program?" Anthony asked, turning to Elaine Hartwell, who now served as the company's chief of guest experience. Elaine, who had surprised everyone with her passionate embrace of the company's new direction, smiled proudly. "The Reed Way training has been our biggest success story. What started as an internal program has evolved into something other companies are asking to implement. We've licensed the training to 15 other hotel chains and 20 companies outside the hospitality industry." The Reed Way was the comprehensive approach to customer service and inclusion that Anthony had helped develop. It went beyond the superficial diversity training common in the industry to address the subtle biases that affected how people were treated. "The scholarship program is also thriving," added Thomas, who had expanded his role beyond legal matters to oversee the company's educational initiatives. "We currently have 68 students in hospitality management programs across the country, all from backgrounds underrepresented in hotel management. Our first class graduates next spring, and we've already offered positions to all of them." Anthony took in this information with quiet satisfaction. The scholarship program had been one of his first initiatives, a way to address the pipeline problem that many companies used as an excuse for their lack of diversity in leadership. "That's excellent news," he said. "Now what about the Liberty Street property? Have we resolved the issues with the renovation?" The meeting continued, covering operational details, expansion plans, and emerging challenges. Throughout it all, Anthony remained engaged and thoughtful, asking probing questions and offering guidance without micromanaging. This was the leadership style that had transformed not just the Westmont, but the understanding of what was possible in the hospitality industry. After the meeting, Anthony had a more personal appointment on his calendar. He took the elevator down to the hotel's main restaurant, which had been redesigned as part of the rebranding. The space was elegant but welcoming, with warm lighting and comfortable seating. It was busy with the lunch crowd, a mix of hotel guests and local professionals who had discovered the quality of the food and service. At a corner table, a young man waited, nervously adjusting his tie. Anthony recognized him immediately from his photo. Darnell Jackson, the son of the housekeeper who had approached Anthony that first day. He had completed his business degree and applied for the management training program at Reed Hospitality. "Mr. Jackson," Anthony said, extending his hand. "Thank you for meeting me." Darnell stood quickly, his handshake firm despite his obvious nervousness. "Mr. Reed, it's an honor. My mother talks about you all the time." They sat, and Anthony waved away the waiter who approached, asking for a few minutes of privacy. "How is your mother?" Anthony asked. Still keeping everyone in line in housekeeping? Darnell laughed. Absolutely. She's been promoted twice since you took over. She's now managing housekeeping for the entire East Coast region. I'm not surprised, Anthony said. She's one of the most organized people I've ever met. The conversation flowed easily after that. Anthony asked about Darnell's studies, his career goals, his perspectives on the hospitality industry. The young man was bright and thoughtful, with innovative ideas about how technology could enhance the guest experience without replacing the human touch that was essential to good service. I have to ask, Darnell said eventually, his curiosity overcoming his professional reserve. Everyone knows the story of how you bought the Westmont after they wouldn't give you a room. But was it really that simple? You just decided to buy an entire hotel chain because of one bad experience? Anthony considered the question carefully. It wasn't simple, and it wasn't just about that one experience. That moment was a tipping point, a clear example of a problem I'd seen many times before. But the decision to buy the Westmont was also a business one. I saw a company with good bones but poor leadership, with potential that wasn't being realized because they were excluding whole groups of potential customers and employees. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Sometimes in life we're presented with moments where a wrong can be addressed in a way that creates something better, not just for ourselves, but for many others. Those are the moments worth investing in. Darnell nodded thoughtfully. My mother always says you didn't just change a company, you changed how people see what's possible. Later that afternoon, Anthony had one more appointment, this one back at the original Westmont where it had all begun. The hotel lobby had been redesigned during the rebranding, but its elegant bones remained the same. The front desk where he'd been told no rooms were available was now staffed by a diverse team of professionals who greeted every guest with genuine warmth. He was meeting a journalist who was writing a feature about the transformation of the hospitality industry for a major business magazine. They had chosen the original Westmont as the backdrop for the interview, a symbolic choice that Anthony appreciated. The journalist, a thoughtful woman with quick eyes and a recorder in hand, met him in the lobby lounge. After the preliminaries, she asked the question Anthony had been expecting. Looking back 3 years later, do you see your acquisition of the Westmont as an act of revenge or justice? Anthony smiled slightly. Neither. I see it as an act of transformation. Revenge would have been buying the hotel just to fire everyone involved in that incident. Justice might have been filing a lawsuit and demanding compensation. What we did was take a broken system and rebuild it into something better. And the financial success? The journalist pressed. The Reed Hospitality Group is now valued at 3 times what you paid for the original chain. Was that part of your plan? It was a possibility I recognized, Anthony acknowledged. When you stop excluding people, as customers, as employees, as leaders, you open up markets and talent pools that your competitors are ignoring. Inclusion isn't just morally right, it's good business. The interview continued, covering the specific changes that had made the biggest impact and the challenges they'd faced along the way. As they wrapped up, the journalist asked one final question. What would you say to the manager who denied you a room that day if you could speak to her now? Anthony didn't need to consider this hypothetically. He and Elaine had had many conversations over the years as they worked together to transform the company. I wouldn't need to say anything. She's now one of our strongest advocates for inclusive practices. People can change when given the right environment and incentives.